Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have New York Congressional candidate Cait Conley back with us. We'll chat with Cait in just a moment. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Cait Conley is a fourth-generation Hudson Valley native, daughter of a postal worker and a construction worker, a decorated combat veteran, and national security expert. And she's running for the House in New York's 17th Congressional District, a seat that is currently held by Republican Mike Lawlor. Cait, welcome back into the back room.
Andy, thank you very much for having me back. I am very excited to be here. Less excited about the topics we're likely to cover and wishing they weren't happening, but here we are.
Yeah, amen to that. So let's revisit your campaign. You're running for Congress in New York's 17th Congressional District, which includes Rockland, Putnam, and parts of Westchester and Dutchess counties. The seat is currently held by one of our favorite Republicans, Mike Lawlor. By that, I mean not. The primary is June 23rd. You're running against several other Democrats. How's the campaign going?
Andy, I could not have hoped for the amount of momentum that we have built. When I launched this campaign a year ago, honestly, the level of grassroots support that we are getting from every corner of this district makes me humble and also fires me up, right? Because we know the stakes. We know why we must win in November, and we cannot risk anything other than getting this country back on track. And that starts with getting the Congress back and checking this administration. So things are going awesome. We just finished up our strongest quarter yet, where we raised over $700,000, bringing our total raised over $2.6 million. We have endorsements from every corner of this district, elected officials in all four counties. Super, super grateful for over the 50 local electeds and organizations that have backed me in this fight, as well as some incredible folks at the national level like Vote Vets, like the National Resources Defense Council Fund. Really folks who understand the significance of the times and what's at stake, Andy, and why we have to fight and win.
Yeah. Well, you were last on this podcast a few months ago. What would you say are the top two or three things that set you apart from your Democratic opponents?
Right now, the ability to defeat Mike Lawlor is the number one issue I hear from our Democratic voters across this district. And that is a space that we cannot risk losing this seat again. We have watched as Mike Lawlor has faced and beaten Democratic politicians before. But Andy, he's never faced somebody like me. And I think this is the fundamental difference that's going to matter. You want a different kind of outcome, you need a different kind of Democrat. And that is where my service record, being a West Point grad, coming from a blue-collar family that goes back in the district 4 generations, having served my nation for 16 years on active duty, doing 6 tours overseas, serving at the White House as a director for counterterrorism, having the experience, spending almost 4 years working with Congress, right, already, being able to get in there on day one and do the job at a sprint. Folks recognize the importance of having that and bringing that to meet this moment. And I think going back to, I don't like to quote Mike Lawlor often, but I really enjoy quoting him here because I think it's going to be instrumental in how I beat him. He talks about New York 17 being the district of heroes, where over 50% of households are either veterans, the family of veterans, first responders, or the family of first responders. Andy, in New York 17, in the Hudson Valley, service matters. And for the last 20 years, while this guy was a political operative, hanging out in the swamp, I was out there defending this nation, leading our sons and daughters in defense of this country to keep Americans safe. And that in this district matters.
And, one of the things, I want to jump around a little bit to something that's obviously related to the campaign, is the mortgage rescue program. This involves more than 10,000 veterans who've lost their homes to foreclosure since May of last year. The Trump administration shut down the VA's mortgage rescue program. Another 90,000 vets are heading toward foreclosure. This is a staple of Donald Trump and the administration and Republicans in Congress like Mike Lawlor, isn't it?
Andy, time and time again, when it comes to actually delivering in ways that are going to help working people address this affordability crisis, to include the housing crisis, we have seen Mike Lawlor and other cowards in Congress enable this administration to do nothing more than pour fuel on the fire of the pain that families are feeling. And this is a great example of where this shouldn't be a political issue in any way, right? This is in the midst of an affordability crisis. You have veterans who have served, who are struggling and are getting back on their feet. And this is what this assistance component of the VA program was intended to do. And instead of being there for our veterans like they were here for our country, they're leaving them hanging. And so this goes back to, while they may say things, their actions reflect that Mike Lawlor, the Trump administration, they don't give a damn about vets. If they did, then they would do something. But instead, they just keep failing. And that's what's got to change.
Well, it is kind of contradicting for someone who does have a high density of veterans in his district to be a part of an administration that makes decisions like this when it comes to vets and housing affordability or housing insecurity as it stands now.
And Andy, we've seen them also do significant cuts to the Veterans Affairs Department, right? Where the quality of care for our veterans is being, put in limbo with these reductions that were thoughtless and baseless. And again, while they may say these great things, when it comes to delivering, to actually doing the work to make people's lives better, that's not where they're willing to get in the game and actually make things happen.
This stems from the top. You have a 5 deferment, bone spurs inflicted, draft dodging coward in the White House who has shown nothing but a general disdain for the military, for our generals, for Gold Star families, for active military, for veterans. This is someone who's called our soldiers, our fallen heroes, suckers and losers, who said to someone like former Chief of Staff John Kelly at Arlington, standing next to John Kelly's son's grave, that he doesn't understand what's in it for them, why they do this. So it doesn't surprise that the mortgage rescue program is just another victim of this administration's assault on the military. We're going to talk about Iran in a second because that's a whole other story and how this administration treats the military. But this is just a reflection of what's going on in Congress as well.
And Andy, we have a draft dodger in the White House and a guy leading the Department of Defense who knows more about Botox than bombs, right? And these folks are fine sending other people's kids to war, but won't send their own, right? Trump just keeps making more and more excuses as to why his children shouldn't serve. But he has no issue putting other people's sons and daughters at risk.
Well, that's the way it's always been. It's not the sons and daughters of the wealthy that enlist and go fight in battle. It's the working and the middle classes, which is why it's so frustrating when you see the continued support he has, even when he's lied to them and said no more wars and America first. To see twisting of the war in Iran be justification for America first is kind of mind-numbing. But let's stay on Mike Lawlor for a second. So we talked about a couple of things, but is there another 2 or 3 things in particular about Mike Lawlor that currently annoy you most and should concern New York 17 voters?
I don't know if we have enough time for that list, Andy, but
I know that was a softball if ever there was.
I know. One. I mean, look, he put out a tweet earlier today and then deleted it of a AI generated image of service members like trying to talk about giving a thumbs up to this weekend's operation, which, yes, I'm incredibly grateful that the service member was rescued. But going back to what we were just talking about, Andy, Mike Lawlor, if you cared about our troops, then you would hold this administration accountable as they continue to send them into harm's way without a plan, without objectives, without Congress authorizing it. Mm-hmm. And so the hypocrisy of words and action continue. But I'll tell you the other thing we're incredibly concerned about is the fact that, Mike Lawlor voted for this one big, beautiful bill last year that is about to rip away healthcare for 37,000 residents here in New York 17. Mm. And these are struggles, again, on top of the affordability crisis, Andy, that we already talked about, right? Lawlor hasn't checked the illegal tariffs, which are driving up costs on everything from groceries to prescriptions to building materials as we're trying to build more homes to address the housing crisis. So, yeah, I've got a real issue with this guy who continues to run his mouth and there is absolutely nothing to back it.
Mm-hmm. last time you were on, we talked about how Democrats actually have a voter registration advantage in your district. And it went for Biden in 2020 and it went for Harris in 2024, which means this seat is winnable. It is flippable. When you're out on the streets and you're out there campaigning and you're talking to non-Democrats, what are they telling you most?
Andy, and that target group you just brought up is a critical piece of winning New York 17. So while there's a Democratic registration advantage, over 28% of registered voters in New York 17 are either independent or unaffiliated. And so with that, you can't just win New York 17 with registered Democrats or registered Republicans alone. You need to have a candidate that's going to get a voter to choose them over a party. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we are going everywhere in this district, all 4 counties, every corner, to meet people where they are and to make the case that they deserve better, right? Because, Andy, so much of this isn't just what we're fighting against, it's also what we're fighting for. And the fact that America must be doing better, right? For the first time in modern American history, the economic prospects of young Americans are worse than their parents or grandparents. We are failing. And that is unacceptable. And so when I talk to folks, regardless of political affiliation, Andy, I hear the same things. And that is families struggling to put food on the table, keep a roof over their heads, keep the lights on, and afford health care. And they feel like America no longer works for working people, right? And so that is what we must be addressing. But we see this administration failing to even acknowledge that that is really a problem, right? Trying to say that there is no affordability crisis, not actually pursuing solutions that would make the lives of working families better. Instead, they're getting us into wars and enforcing tariffs that are driving up prices on families. And that's just the utter BS we continue to see from Trump, those who enable him, to include cowards in Congress like Mike Lawlor.
Yeah. Well, he was asked this morning at his Easter egg hunt what he says to Americans who are concerned about the war, especially as it's taking away from focusing here at home on the issues you're talking about. And he said, quote, "They're foolish." So when you think about that and you think about how first he's lied to his base, he's lied to America about America first and no more wars. And now that they're upset with that lie, he's insulting them. So New York, as you know, was very pivotal in flipping the House to Republicans last time. And I think it's going to be as critical and consequential this time. How confident are you feeling about all the, I'll call it hysteria, because sometimes I talk to people, myself included, and it's hard not to think there's some kind of blue wave coming in November. And it's precisely because of the struggles that people are experiencing that you've just talked about, but it's the attitude coming out of the White House, out of this president, out of Congress. Like, they just don't seem to care. And it's almost like they're defying independents and moderate Republicans to vote against them.
Andy, I hope Mike participated in the little Easter egg hunt, because maybe he found an egg with a spine in it. Because right now, his actions demonstrate that the only person he's going to be looking out for is himself and his own political ambition. And so, to your point, what I caution folks when we feel talks about this blue wave coming in November is I completely agree that there is tremendous opportunity for Democrats to win back Americans and for us to win back places like New York 17. But what I caution folks is just because people are frustrated with one side doesn't mean they're automatically going to trust and turn to the other. And so as Democrats, we have tremendous work to do to close that gap, to make the case, to understand that we've got to regain the trust of people in order to gain their vote, right? And I think that is where Democrats have failed the last several years, where we took things for granted. Mm-hmm. And as a consequence of failing to deliver, of failing to communicate effectively, people, they're frustrated with both sides, right? What I hear is people are just sick of politicians. And Andy, I get it. I watched firsthand, working with Congress while I was at the White House, when I was a senior exec at CISA, how politicians on both sides got us into this mess. And that's why I'm doing this, because I don't believe politicians are going to get us out of it. I believe it's time for a new generation of leadership to come in, who's no BS, focused on delivering and fixing what is broken. Because I will tell you, Andy, I did not spend my life serving this country, deploying overseas, going to combat for America to watch politicians back home ruin it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you think about a candidate and now Mayor Zoran Mamdani. I'm not a progressive, but I looked at his campaign and I saw nothing but success and the communication skills that you just talked about. It doesn't seem like it's too difficult a task this year for Democrats to have a message that works. All they got to do is look at Mamdani. He said, we have an affordability problem. Voters are telling us we have an affordability problem with healthcare, with gas and energy prices, with grocery prices, with auto insurance, with all kinds of products and services. And while I'm encouraged that all the special elections of the last 12 to 18 months or so have gone the Democrats' way, which may indicate that finally the party has got a message and the right candidates, but I still am a little concerned that it still seems a little bit like Democrats still can have the knack for snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, because the message is so simple. Just talk about affordability, talk about the economy, talk about the kitchen table stuff. That's what people want to hear.
And deliver, right? Listen, talk about the things that matter to people, that are going to make their lives better. Come to the table with solutions.
Yeah.
And then deliver. And I think that's the other part, Andy, is delivering and communicating are where I believe the Democratic Party has been failing to meet the moment. And that must change. And so this is what I tell folks. Even if we win in November, which we're working hard to make sure we do when we flip the House and we check this administration, this can't be just about what we're fighting against. It's got to be what we're fighting for. And so even with Trump in the White House, and even if we don't have the Senate, we have got to find ways to still deliver for the American people, because they cannot afford to wait until 2029, And so, yeah, I believe just talking to people, right? Being a real human, being authentic, and having empathy for what they're going through, and letting them look in your eyes and see, I know that person's going to fight like hell to actually deliver, and not just saying things to say them.
Yeah, I've said this before, like if I was a candidate right now and I was out stumping, what I would say to the crowd is, I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're an independent. What I care about is that when you're at the gas station, it's costing you over $4 a gallon now. Or when you are at the grocery store, you might have to put some stuff back because you can't afford the things you could afford a year ago or 2 years ago. And I look at the campaign of James Tallarico down in Texas, which is the kind of campaign he's running, which is enough with the partisan stuff. We don't need it. We don't need that. There's so much else on the table for us to feast on if we just talk to people about the issues that matter to them. And like you say, we offer solutions for how together we're going to meet those challenges. That's why I say it doesn't sound like it's a difficult task, but I just hope that the party and the candidates can do it. You clearly have it down pat. I'm not so sure about a lot of others that I see.
Andy, I truly believe that it is partisanship that is ruining this country. And we have got to get back to the point where we remember that we are neighbors first, that we are Americans first, and everything else is secondary. Because with that mentality, we will be able to solve hard problems, and government will do its job, which is to serve all people, not just the people who elected them. And that is the type of culture, I think, leadership that you see folks stepping up right now that has inspired me to run, right? Where I'm like, look, enough. We got to solve problems for people. I don't care how they register to vote, or honestly, even if they vote, we have a responsibility to serve people. And we are failing in that as a government. And that has to end. Because generations before us have done a lot harder things. And I'll be damned if we're going to lose this country on our watch. Mm-hmm. So let's step up to the moment and deliver for people who need us to right now.
So true. Before we move on to the war, if people want to learn more about the campaign, make a donation, support you, where do they go?
Check us out at CaitConley.com. It's CaitConley.
All right. So we have this war, or as Trump has called it, an excursion which actually means a short leisurely trip, which is kind of bizarre given that 13 service members have been killed. A military operation. Now he's calling it like a little journey. Like, give me your thoughts on the last, 5-6 weeks now of this completely unnecessary and, as you mentioned before, perhaps illegal and unconstitutional war.
Andy, we woke up on a Saturday morning to find out that our country was at war with Iran. Without a president making the case to the American people before we did it, without the president going to Congress to get an authorization for the use of military force. And make no mistake, I believe we cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon. But what we are doing right now, going into a conflict that has no clearly defined objectives, like there was very clearly no plan at the beginning of this for what our end game was. How do we even define what a successful operation would be? You heard the president talking about regime change. Well, guess what? We took out an entire generation of Iranian leadership, to include the Ayatollah, only to replace them with even more hardline leaders coming from the IRGC.
And the Ayatollah's son, who now, because his father, his mother, his sister, his aunt, his wife, and his dog were also killed, he is a little bit angrier at the United States than his dad was 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, Andy, I'll tell you, as someone who has been to multiple war zones following 9/11, when people have their families killed, they're not inclined to pursue peace. Mm-hmm. And I think this goes back to long term. Is this conflict actually making America or our allies or the world more safe? And this is the problem. If you came into this conflict saying this was about Iran not getting a nuclear weapon, well, the only way that you can make sure that doesn't happen long term is through political change. Otherwise, you must just continuously get into military conflict to continue to degrade their nuclear weapons capabilities.
Well,
like
that's I want to just interrupt for a second, because that is such a really good point. And that is, Donald Trump said he obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities last June. And to your point, here we are again. And what's to stop this cycle of war 8-9 months from now and 8-9 months from then? Because you're right, you cannot stop this stuff purely by just dropping some bombs, because they just reconstitute.
Andy, exactly. And this goes back to military capabilities are never the long-term solution for this type of strategic objective that we are trying to achieve. You need to have a political shift as well. And that goes back to what we are doing, especially this most recent unhinged threat from our commander-in-chief, talking about blowing up civilian infrastructure. Like, Andy, 2 months ago, you had the Iranian people, right, who were out putting their lives on the line protesting against the Iranian regime because they couldn't get their families food and water. When we're talking about striking civilian infrastructure, those Iranian people who were blaming the regime 2 months ago, 2 weeks from now may be blaming America. Mm-hmm. Like, we have to understand that doing an air campaign is not going to achieve the results that we are talking about without additional political objectives and strategy. And that is where what we are seeing is a frustrated commander-in-chief, a frustrated Trump, who is pouting and spiraling because this wasn't as easy as he thought it was going to be. And it's like, no kidding, man.
But you have experience with this stuff. You have a military background. This is a summary of his threats about the Strait of Hormuz since late March. On the 22nd, open Hormuz in 48 hours. On the 26th, open Hormuz in 5 days. On the 27th, okay, you can open it in 10 days. April 4th, open Hormuz in 48 hours. April 5th, open Hormuz by Tuesday. April 5th, yesterday, open the fucking strait by Tuesday. That's a direct quote, which you mentioned unhinged before. I repeated verbatim because When have we ever heard the United States president talk like that? But the bigger point I want to make is these are just nothing but idle threats, right? You were in the military. What does it say to you when a United States president, the commander-in-chief, literally just goes, if you don't do what I say, I'm just going to keep moving the goalposts? Like, what's their incentive to do anything? What's their incentive to come to the table? What's their incentive to negotiate, to open the strait, to put down their nukes? What's the incentive for anything?
Andy,
how effective can his strategy be?
Yeah. Andy, I have done 6 overseas deployments, right? Earned 3 Bronze Stars, was the director of counterterrorism at the White House, where I also worked and led policy efforts around Iranian non-state actor groups, terror groups. I cannot believe that we are really in a place where this spiraling individual is our commander-in-chief, and we have such a spineless Congress and spineless cabinet that no one is stopping it.
What about Hegseth? What's your thoughts on Hegseth? I'm sure you have plenty.
This is a guy who thinks this is a game. And there is nothing about this that is a game. It is people's lives, right? You have an individual who right now is firing some of the American military's best leaders we have seen in modern military history, right? He just fired General Randy George, who was the chief of staff of the Army. One of the most innovative general officers and combat experienced general officers we have, because he was doing the right thing, which is keeping the military focused on being a meritocracy and apolitical. And so Hegseth is clearly threatened by anyone who is more competent than him, which is a very low bar. So I'd say the entire Department of Defense. But the harm he is doing in removing some of our military's best leaders, I think, is going to go well beyond just this conflict. And to be doing that at a time when we are at war is just unthinkable. And to do it because truly he is just so bitter and angry that people aren't just doing whatever he wants them to do, shows that he is unfit for this role, shows he should have never been confirmed, and shows that Congress continues to fail to do its job because they should be impeaching him. We should absolutely not have Pete Hegseth as our Secretary of Defense, yet we do. And this isn't a game. And so I am over any excuses where people are like, oh no, it's this or that. No, it's bullshit. The guy is unqualified, he's unfit, and we can't allow him to continue to be at the helm.
Do you have any sense from folks you may still be talking to who are actively in the military how he has affected morale?
It is so important to understand that for those who wear the uniform, the oath we swear to the Constitution is something that matters so much. You don't serve a president, you don't serve a political party. You serve this nation and the Constitution. And what is so incredibly special about the military is its apolitical nature. The fact that it is there for this country, period. And with that, as someone who has proudly worn the uniform, you know, yes, we are the best military in the world, and that's what America deserves. We are also a global force for good, where when soldiers go out there to take on conflicts on behalf of this nation, it's to keep America safe. It's also to help our allies in need and keep our allies safe. And when you think about how we've conducted ourselves, again, as someone who's literally dropped bombs, right, in combat, the importance of ensuring you're always minimizing collateral damage or potential civilian casualties and avoiding civilian infrastructure, like all of these foundational things that we take in as part of our American military culture that you see this administration just disregarding shows that they don't have any respect for the institution or the sacrifices for generations that have been made to build them. And they are unfit to continue to lead.
Yeah, look, the promise we make, people like you who have bravely and patriotically suited up to serve and protect and defend this country, is that we won't use you unless it's a last resort. We won't send you into battle unless it's a last resort. And this administration, this president, He uses, abuses, and exploits our military as a first resort. That's like his opening chess piece. Like, I'll fuck you up, I'll bomb you, I'll do all kinds of shit, make your life miserable, make your people suffer. So that gets you to the table that I want to get you to. That is just so convoluted and dysfunctional and goes against everything this country and our military has ever stood for, in my opinion.
Yeah, Andy, he treats every problem like it's a nail and the military is the hammer, right? And it's just like, look, this is not how you use military force responsibly. And that is not the international order that we have built painstakingly since World War II. Again, going back to, we have seen this story play out, like just going back to the Iran conflict. We have done this before where we engage in a conflict with no exit strategy. And we engage in such a way where, again, like the political end state is essential to our national security, but we disregard that part of the operation. And so you end up with a situation where we may have made Iran even more of a problem 10 years from now than it was today. And so understanding when military force is appropriate, how, and what it's supposed to complement, and how you really solve these problems in a way that addresses national security issues is just something this administration has consistently demonstrated they do not understand. And the question is, how much of a price are we going to pay as America and our allies? You know, as we've become distracted and myopically focused on this Iranian conflict that Trump started, we've lost our eye on the ball when it comes to the war in Ukraine with Russia, which is a strategic adversary. Mm-hmm. You know, our NATO alliance is questioning America's role and if they can rely on us. Like all of these things, Andy, that actually matter for America's long-term national security, we are watching unravel under this administration. The amount of work we have to do to rebuild and to build better going forward and regain trust is hard to even fathom.
Well, that's a great segue into my last question, which has to do with terrorism. You've led counterterrorism efforts on the National Security Council and worked at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. How exposed are we here at home now because of this war? And especially when you factor in the cuts and the reassignments in our counterintelligence and law enforcement agencies.
I mean, Andy, the fact that just, what was it, days before this conflict with Iran, we saw the firing of FBI agents who were Iranian specialists, right, because of January 6th investigations. It just, again, it shows you that this administration is not taking national security seriously and how they conduct themselves. And so, yes, I will say, look, there are very real terrorism threats that are out there targeting America and Americans all over the world. And we cannot take safety and security for granted. But I will tell you, as someone who has dedicated my life to this, our nation is less safe today than it was 16 months ago. And that crushes me to say. Like, I don't want to say that regardless of who is sitting where in what office. But that's the reality. You have watched some of our most talented leaders and agents and professionals leave the intelligence community, the FBI, the military, because of political reasons, in terms of them getting persecuted, you know, for their perceived lack of loyalty. So you've seen a loss of talent. You've seen a loss of focus, right? Going back to, we are starting more conflicts. We're not focusing on other threats that were already pre-existing. You know, again, in the 21st century, you're talking about cyber. Look, oceans don't protect us anymore. Mm-hmm. Between hypersonic systems and cyber attacks, we need to be talking about what the 21st century national security requirements need. And that includes addressing things like climate change, which, Andy, has become a national security crisis as Americans are dying, communities are being devastated, businesses displaced because of climate change. But we're not even having those real conversations.
Well, it's a mess, and I think part of the problem is, we said before, we have a draft dodger in the White House who's spending his time cosplaying Rambo to compensate for his lifetime of cowardice. You have this maniac at the Department of Defense. And I think both of them, on some level, are sociopaths. That's not a good recipe for success in this country. And it doesn't make me feel good, but it's people like you who do make me feel good, because I do believe that November can be a game changer. So that's why it's so important for everybody to vote, and for independents who thankfully so far have shown that they have abandoned this president and this party, and even moderate Republicans. I think there's an opportunity here for all of us collectively, through the efforts of people like yourself who courageously run to go into that cesspool. I mean, it amazes me why people do that, but it's duty and patriotism that I think compels people like you to do that. And so we should all be thankful and grateful that you do that, because in a few months from now, things can change dramatically.
Andy, this is a fight for our country. You know, after 16 years in the military, 6 tours overseas, 2 years at the White House, 2 years at CISA, I never thought I'd feel like the greatest threat to our future, to our country, to our security would be coming from within our own borders. And that is the threat we are faced with today. And so damn right, on our watch, we're going to go into this fight, you know, ready to go and making sure that we prevail, because the stakes are so high that we can't afford. This is truly a no-fail mission. We cannot afford to lose. And it's not too late. That's the other part, right? It is not too late to get this country back on track. But it starts with November.
Absolutely. Well, good luck with the campaign. We'll keep an eye on it, and we will definitely have you back before the primary to continue the conversation. Thanks for
Andy, thanks so much. And thanks to your listeners.
All right. Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhiniecliff, with additional editing by Matty Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Lengyel. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.